In the cold silence of Oregon's mountain woods, a battle-worn Navy SEAL named Jack Thorne lived alone with his aging K9, Echo, both carrying scars that time couldn't heal. But one stormy night, fate sent them a stranger, a young CEO, bleeding and broken, her car overturned by the lake. Jack could have walked away, but something, perhaps divine, perhaps destiny, kept him there. As he carried her into his cabin and fought to save her life, neither knew this act of mercy would draw them into a deadly web of betrayal, redemption, and a miracle only God could have written. Where are you watching from today? And if this story moves your heart, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story will touch your soul even deeper. Rain drummed on the pine needles like 1,000 restless fingers. The Oregon wilderness stretched in every direction, a world of dark evergreens, mist-soaked air, and the eternal sound of water whispering against stone. The lake reflected the storm's pulse, black and rippling. Jack Thorne stood by the cabin window, his silhouette cut sharp against the pale glow of lightning. At 40, his body still bore the shape of discipline, broad-shouldered, tall, with the rigid stillness of a soldier who had forgotten how to relax. His hair was dark brown, streaked with the first threads of gray, and a short, uneven beard shadowed a face carved by years of command and loss. There was a line between his brows that never faded, even in sleep, if he ever slept. The cabin smelled of wood smoke, gun oil, and old coffee. On the floor near the door lay Echo, his German shepherd, a retired military K9, 8 years old, large and muscular with thick sable fur and the kind of eyes that seemed to see ghosts. Echo's ears flicked as thunder rolled across the valley. He was restless tonight, pacing near the door, whining low in his throat. Jack turned from the window, muttering, "Easy, boy, it's just a storm." But Echo didn't calm. His instincts, honed from years beside men who lived and died on timing, were never wrong. Jack's life had narrowed to this silence, after the Navy SEALs, after Afghanistan, after the explosion that took 2 of his brothers in arms and left him buried under rubble for 6 hours. The world had felt thinner. He'd walked away from the medals, the honors, and the noise. Bought this half-rotten cabin near Crater Lake with the last of his pension. It was supposed to be peace, but it was really exile. Sometimes he still heard the scream of the radio when the comms went dead. Sometimes he saw the flash of the IED before the dust swallowed the world. He'd learned to live with ghosts. What he couldn't live with was people. Echo barked once, sharp, alert, then again, louder. Jack's head snapped up. The dog's body had gone rigid, tail straight, eyes fixed toward the woods. A low growl vibrated in his chest. "What is it?" Jack grabbed his flashlight and his jacket. The cold hit him the moment he stepped outside, wet, cutting, smelling of pine and iron. Echo bounded ahead, his paws splashing through puddles, leading toward the road that curved along the lake. Lightning flashed, and for a brief instant, Jack saw it, the silver glint of metal through the rain. A car. No, a black SUV, flipped on its side near the water's edge, smoke rising from the crumpled hood. Jack sprinted, his boots sinking into mud. "Echo, stay close." He reached the wreckage, the windshield shattered, one door jammed shut. Inside, through the haze of smoke and rain, he saw movement. A woman. Her hand was pressed weakly against the glass. Blood ran down her temple, streaking her pale skin. "Hold on," Jack muttered, bracing his shoulder and kicking at the door hinge. Once, twice. On the third strike, it gave way with a shriek of metal. He ducked inside. The woman's hair was chestnut, slick with rain and blood, clinging to a face that would have belonged in glossy magazines, if not for the ruin of terror in her eyes. Her clothes, a dark gray business suit, tailored but torn, screamed money. The kind of person who didn't belong out here. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, my phone, She coughed, blood staining her lips. "Don't let them finish it. The company isn't safe." Jack frowned. Company? He slid one arm under her shoulders, feeling the slick warmth of blood. The wound was deep along her ribcage, a knife wound, not from the crash. That realization made his pulse tighten. He pulled her from the car, laying her gently on the wet ground. The SUV hissed as flames licked at the engine. Echo circled, barking toward the tree line, wary of shadows. "Stay alert, Echo." Jack tore open his field kit, always ready, old habits. His hands moved automatically. Compress the wound, check for airway, pulse, pupils. The kind of work he'd done 100 times on sand instead of mud. The woman's breathing was shallow but steady. "Ma'am," he said, pressing gauze against her side. "You're gonna be fine. What's your name?" She blinked weakly, her voice trembling. "Clara Weston." Jack froze. The name stirred a faint memory. She was someone he'd seen on a news feed once, CEO of Weston Dynamics, one of the biggest tech firms on the West Coast, a woman known for her brilliance, her ambition, and her rumored lack of mercy. Now she looked nothing like that legend. She tried to move, but Jack placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Don't. You'll bleed more." He tore the sleeve from his flannel shirt, binding the wound tightly. Clara's eyes fluttered open again, glassy with pain. "They wanted the files. I didn't give them." Her voice broke, and Jack leaned closer, hearing the fear that comes from betrayal, not random violence. She wasn't just a victim. She was hunted. Who wanted them? But she was already slipping into unconsciousness. Echo barked again, 2 sharp bursts, the signal they'd used during training. Movement nearby. Jack's hand instinctively went to the old Beretta on his belt. The rain swallowed sound, but the forest felt watching. He looked at the SUV, flames now crawling across the chassis, and made his decision. He lifted Clara in his arms, surprised by how light she was. "Come on, Echo. We're heading home." The trek back to the cabin was brutal. Mud, wind, the weight of a life he hadn't meant to save. Echo led the way, ears flat against the storm. Twice, Jack thought he heard footsteps behind them, but when he turned, there was nothing but rain and trees. Inside the cabin, Jack laid Clara on his bed, stripped off her soaked jacket, and checked the wound again. The bleeding had slowed. Her pulse was stronger. Echo stationed himself by the door, eyes locked on the window, muscles tense. Jack wiped the blood from his hands, his mind racing. Who attacks a billionaire CEO in the middle of nowhere? Why was she driving alone at midnight through a back road most locals didn't even use? He poured whiskey into a tin cup, stared at it for a long time, then set it down untouched. His reflection in the window looked older than he remembered. "You had to get involved," he muttered to himself. "Couldn't just stay out of it, could you?" He looked at the sleeping woman, her features softening in the dim light, the rise and fall of her chest steady now. For a fleeting moment, something in him stirred, something he thought he'd buried with his brothers overseas, a sense of duty, or maybe redemption. Thunder rumbled again, and Jack glanced at Echo, who hadn't moved. The dog's hackles were still raised. He trusted Echo's instincts more than his own. "Someone's out there," Jack whispered. "We'll find out who." Outside, the storm intensified, waves lashing the lake into whitecaps. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the trees, the faint sound of an engine started, then faded. Jack's grip tightened on his pistol. The past, it seemed, had found him again, wearing a new face, bleeding on his bed. and as the wind screamed across the lake, he knew the stillness of his exile had ended forever. The morning broke gray and cold, the kind of light that felt tired before it even began. Mist rolled off the lake, curling around the cabin like a secret. Inside, the smell of damp wood mixed with coffee and antiseptic. Jack Thorne sat in the worn armchair, boots planted wide, a half-cleaned rifle across his knees. His eyes, hard as flint, stayed on the woman sleeping in his bed. Clara Weston stirred beneath the coarse blanket, her breathing shallow at first, then steadier. The blood had drained from her face, leaving it almost translucent against the dim light filtering through the curtains. When her eyes opened, confusion swept across them like a storm over glassy water. She blinked, struggling to anchor herself. Where am I?" Her voice was soft, hesitant, like someone relearning speech after silence. Jack leaned forward. "You're safe. For now." She turned her head toward him, studying his face, the short, dark beard, the faint scar cutting through his eyebrow, the soldier's posture he couldn't shake. "Who are you?" "Jack Thorne," he said simply. "Found you by the lake last night. You crashed. You were bleeding bad." Her brow furrowed. "Crashed?" Her gaze darted around the small cabin. Rough timber walls, a stove humming quietly, a loyal German shepherd sitting sentinel by the door. "I don't remember." "That's the concussion talking," Jack replied. He set the rifle aside, stood, and poured water into a tin cup. His movements were efficient, economical, every step measured. "You're lucky. Could have drowned out there." She took the cup with trembling hands. Her nails painted a faint, nude tone, chipped now. They looked too elegant for this place. I should call someone. My assistant, or..." Her eyes widened. "My phone." Jack pulled the broken device from the counter and held it out. The screen was shattered beyond recognition. "Found it in your car. Battery fried." He'd already pried out the SIM card, which sat in his pocket like a secret. "I can fix it," she said automatically, as if the thought of helplessness offended her. She pressed the power button again and again, disbelief edging her voice. "Why won't it?" "Because someone was tracking you through it," Jack cut in. His tone was calm but firm. "I saw the signal pings when I turned it on. Whoever ran you off that road wasn't done with you." She froze, staring at him as the words sank in. "Tracked me? You're saying this wasn't an accident?" Jack nodded once. "Your brakes were tampered with. Bullet holes in the back window. Whoever did it meant to make it look like a crash." Clara's hands began to shake. She looked down at them as if they belonged to someone else. "I don't remember anything after dinner. There was music. A toast." Her voice drifted, faint as the mist outside. And then, darkness. Jack watched her carefully. She wasn't just scared. She was fractured. He'd seen that look before in men pulled from explosions, alive but missing pieces of themselves. "You'll remember more," he said. "Memory comes back in pieces, like shrapnel. Hurts, but it's the only way it heals." Echo let out a low rumble. The dog stood, moving to the window. His fur bristled slightly, gaze fixed on the tree line. Jack followed his eyes, just the forest, still and wet. But Echo didn't growl at nothing. Jack stepped to the window and peered through the condensation. Nothing moved. Yet the silence felt wrong, too thick, too deliberate. He turned back to Clara. "Stay inside. Don't open that door for anyone but me." She frowned. "Where are you going?" "To check something." He slipped on his jacket, grabbed his pistol, and stepped outside. The rain had thinned to drizzle. He crouched by the tire tracks, still fresh from last night, his own boot prints mixed with smaller ones. Newer. Someone had been close, maybe an hour ago. He followed the prints towards the trees until they vanished on harder ground. Whoever it was, they knew how to move quietly. Too quietly for a random stranger. When he returned, Clara sat at the table, holding Echo's collar like a lifeline. Her face had color again, though her eyes were haunted. "I remember a name," she said suddenly. "Victor. Victor Kane. He was at the dinner." Jack froze mid-step. "He a friend?" Her expression flickered with something sharp. Anger, maybe. "No. My deputy. Ambitious, brilliant, cruel. He once told me some people were expendable in business." She stared down at her hands. "Why would he be in my head now?" Jack didn't answer. He knew the type. Men who smiled while they planned your funeral. "You need to rest. Concussion. Blood loss. I'll get you food." But she shook her head. "You think they'll come back, don't you?" "I think they didn't finish the job," Jack replied. "And people like that don't leave loose ends." A long silence hung between them. Clara looked around the cabin again, at the simple tools, the unpolished wood, the faded photo on the shelf of 3 men in military uniforms. "You were a soldier," she said softly. Jack's jaw tightened. "Was." "What happened to them?" She nodded toward the photo. "They didn't make it home?" His tone ended the conversation, but not her curiosity. She saw the weight behind his eyes, the same guilt she'd seen in boardrooms after failed projects. Only this was carved deeper, older, like stone eroded by time. Echo padded over to Jack and nudged his leg, breaking the tension. Jack scratched behind the dog's ear absently. "Echo and I served together. He saved lives, more than most people I know." Clara reached out a cautious hand. "May I?" Echo sniffed her fingers, then leaned into her touch, surprising both of them. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "And loyal." "More than some humans," Jack muttered. Outside, the mist began to lift, revealing a stillness that wasn't peace. Jack moved to the SUV wreck again, inspecting it in daylight. 2 clean bullet holes through the tailgate. .45 caliber. A professional's weapon. He crouched lower, tracing the grooves along the brake lines, sawed through, then sealed crudely to delay failure. Whoever set this up wanted it to look accidental, but didn't care if the details survived the rain. When he returned, Clara was standing by the table, wrapped in his flannel shirt. The fabric hung loose on her thin frame. Her expression was steadier now, though her hands fidgeted with the hem. "If what you say is true," she began, "then I can't stay here. They'll find me." Jack shook his head. "Not yet. The woods buy us time. They'll assume you're dead until they're sure. We use that." "We?" Her tone held disbelief and the faintest spark of gratitude. He ignored both. "You remember anything else? Anyone who'd want you gone?" She hesitated. "Too many. That's the problem with power. Everyone smiles until you stop giving them what they want." She rubbed her temples. "There was something about files. I said I'd expose them, but I can't remember what." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Then we figure it out before they do." Echo barked once, short, sharp, from the door. Jack's hand went instantly to his gun. Through the window, a figure was approaching along the narrow trail. A man in a heavy coat, carrying a toolbox. "Relax," the stranger called as he neared the porch. He was tall, maybe late 50s, with silver hair and a kindly face weathered by the mountain air. His name, as Jack soon learned, was Frank Duval, the local mechanic and occasional mail carrier. He'd known Jack for a few months, though only by nods and short exchanges at the gas station. "Saw smoke by the road," Frank said, Figured someone wrecked again. Jack studied him. Steady hands, clear eyes, no weapon in sight. But years of training never let him trust first impressions. "We're fine, just cleaning up." Frank shrugged. "If you need a tow, I can call up my boy. Got a truck big enough for that mess." His gaze shifted toward the cabin door, curiosity flickering. "Didn't know you had company." Jack blocked the view subtly. "She's hurt, needs rest." Frank nodded slowly, then tipped his cap. "Storm season brings trouble, huh? You take care, Jack." He left without pressing further, boots crunching on gravel until the forest swallowed him. Inside, Clara watched from behind the curtain. "He seemed kind." Jack shook his head. "Kindness can't stop bullets. Pack light. If he saw you, word might spread." Clara's pulse quickened. "We're leaving?" "Not yet," Jack said, loading his pistol. "But we're not staying long either. If they think you're dead, that's our advantage. Let's keep it that way." Echo lay by the doorway again, tail motionless, eyes sharp, a soldier guarding the only safe house in a war no one else could see. Outside, the lake mirrored the gray sky. Somewhere out there, the people who'd wanted Clara dead were already recalculating. And inside, two strangers, broken in different ways, began to realize their fates had collided for reasons far deeper than chance. The forest turned into a cathedral of shadows as night fell. The moon hung thin and cold above the treetops, barely cutting through the mist that drifted over the lake. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, throwing orange veins of light across the wooden walls. Jack Thorne sat near the window, his hand resting on the rifle balanced across his knees. His eyes stayed on the tree line, his breathing steady but alert, the rhythm of a man who had lived too long on the edge of danger. Echo lay by the door, muscles tight beneath his thick sable coat. His ears flicked with every gust of wind, but now he was still, too still. Then, without a sound, he rose. His fur bristled, nose lifting towards the cracked window. A low growl vibrated from deep in his chest. Jack whispered, "What is it, boy?" He followed Echo's gaze into the darkness. The forest stared back, silent and vast. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable, a twig snapping, followed by the hush of footsteps trying to stay quiet. Jack's instincts flared to life. "Clara," he said sharply, "kill the lantern." She was sitting at the table, hunched over a piece of paper, trying to write down fragments of the memories that came to her in flashes. The pen froze in her hand. "What? Now." The light vanished, plunging them into darkness. Only the faint glow of embers remained, enough to catch the outline of Jack's face, tense, focused, deadly calm. Outside, more movement, the crunch of leaves, a whisper in the wind. Jack's hand found his knife as easily as breathing. He gestured for Clara to stay low. Echo pressed himself against the door, ready. Through the sliver of the window, Jack saw them. 3 figures moving between the trees. Dressed in matte black tactical gear, faces obscured by masks, each carrying suppressed weapons. They moved like professionals, not hired thugs, trained operatives. Jack muttered almost to himself. "They found us faster than I thought." He slipped toward the back of the cabin, motioning to Echo with 2 fingers. Flank left. The dog's body flowed into motion, silent as shadow. The first man approached the front steps, a flashlight flicking across the ground. His name would later be learned as Riley Beck, mid-30s, lean, sharp-jawed, with a scar running from his ear to the corner of his mouth. A souvenir from too many violent jobs. Once a soldier, now a gun for hire. The type who'd sold his honor when the world stopped rewarding decency. Behind him moved Carter Haynes, heavier set, bald, the kind of man whose silence carried threat. His right arm was sleeved in faded tattoos, Old Marine insignias turned ghosts of who he used to be. The third, Mikhail Orlov, was smaller, wiry, and restless, his accent Eastern European. He'd been a demolitions expert before his discharge, and his nervous fingers still twitched as though always searching for a detonator. Riley raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. "She's inside," he whispered, his voice low, confident. "Signal was right. Kane wants her alive long enough to confirm." Jack's jaw tightened at the name. Kane, Clara's deputy. The puzzle pieces clicked in his mind, dark and sharp. The doorknob turned slowly. Jack struck first. He kicked the back door open, circling wide through the rain, flanking them. The first flash of lightning turned the woods into a silver blur, and in that second, Jack moved. Silent, precise, unstoppable. He hit Riley from behind, blade flashing, driving him down into the mud. The man choked, weapon slipping from his grasp. "3 targets," Jack hissed to himself. "Rule 1, divide and vanish." Echo erupted from the darkness, launching himself at Carter with a growl that tore through the storm. The bigger man fell backward, firing wildly. Muffled shots cracked through the night, bullets sparking against stone. Inside, Clara covered her ears, frozen in terror. Her pulse raced so loud she could barely hear her own breathing. The smell of gunpowder seeped through the cracks in the cabin walls. Outside, the fight became chaos. Bursts of light, shadows clashing. Jack caught Mikkel's wrist mid-swing, twisted it until the man's weapon clattered to the ground, then slammed him into a tree trunk. "Who sent you?" Jack growled, pressing the knife under his chin. Mikkel's eyes darted, panic mixing with defiance. "You already know." Jack tightened his grip. "Say it." "Victor Kane," Mikkel spat, blood on his lip. "He wants her dead before she remembers everything." A gun clicked behind Jack. Riley, half conscious but alive, raising his weapon. Jack spun, firing once. The bullet hit true. Riley dropped without another sound. Echo whined softly nearby, limping, a graze along his side where a bullet had nicked fur and flesh. "Easy, boy," Jack said, kneeling beside him for a brief moment. "You did good." From inside the cabin, Clara's voice trembled. "Jack, are you—" "I'm fine. Stay there." He turned back to Mikkel, who was gasping now, rain mixing with the blood running down his face. "You're going to tell me where Kane is?" Mikhail laughed weakly, the sound bitter. "You think you can stop him? He owns people like you." Jack's voice went cold. "That's where you're wrong." Minutes later, the forest went quiet again. 2 bodies lay motionless. Mikhail was bound, wrists tied, a strip of duct tape pressed over his mouth. Jack dragged him toward the cabin, pushing him inside. Clara backed away instinctively, fear and disbelief warring in her eyes. "Oh, God, what did you—" "He's alive," Jack said flatly. "For now. We need answers." Jack set Mikhail against the wall and ripped the tape from his mouth. The man hissed in pain but smirked. "You'll wish you killed me." "Not yet," Jack said. He picked up a flashlight, clicking it on, letting the beam linger on the prisoner's face. "Kane, where is he?" Mikhail spat blood onto the floor. "You'll never find him, but he'll find you." Jack crouched low, the soldier in him calculating every breath, every twitch. "He already did," he said quietly, "and he lost." Clara, watching, felt a strange duality, horror at the violence, gratitude for the man who'd brought it to her defense. When Mikhail refused to speak again, Jack bound him tighter and stepped outside to radio Frank Duval's frequency on an old shortwave set. No answer. Static hissed through the storm. Clara followed him to the doorway, her voice shaking. "He said Kane wanted me dead. Why? What could I have possibly done?" Jack looked out toward the dark tree line, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. You probably tried to do the right thing. That's usually enough to make enemies in your world. Inside, Mikkel began laughing again, a sound that didn't belong to sanity. You think saving her saves you? You've got no idea what she's part of. Jack turned, silencing him with a single, cold look. Then you can enlighten me in the morning. He locked the man in the shed behind the cabin, double-bolting it. Echo limped beside him, and Jack checked the wound again. Shallow, bleeding lightly. He cleaned it carefully with steady hands, whispering, "You'll be fine, partner." Inside, Clara sat at the table, staring at the window. Her reflection looked older, haunted. "You should have killed him," she said softly. Jack glanced at her, voice calm. "I've killed enough men in the dark. Sometimes it's more useful to let one live." She met his gaze, and for the first time, trust flickered in her eyes. Fragile, uncertain, but real. As dawn began to bleed over the horizon, the forest around them grew quiet once more. But neither Jack nor Clara believed in silence anymore. It was only the pause between storms. The morning after the ambush dawned with a hollow silence. Smoke still clung to the damp air, mingling with the scent of gunpowder and pine. Jack Thorne tightened the bandage around his shoulder, his movements stiff but controlled. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only exhaustion and pain, the kind that came not just from wounds but from memory. Echo lay near the hearth, his side patched, his breathing steady though shallow. Clara Weston knelt beside the dog, her trembling hand stroking the matted fur. "He saved me twice," she whispered. Jack looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "He's tougher than both of us combined." Then he turned toward the door. "We can't stay here. They'll send more." Clara rose slowly, pale but resolute. "Where will we go?" "To someone who owes me," Jack replied. By midday, they were deep into the highway that wound through the Oregon highlands. Rain streaked the windshield, turning the world into blurs of gray and green. The tension between them was quiet, taut as wire. Every mile pulled them farther from safety, yet somehow closer to the truth neither had spoken aloud. When they reached the outskirts of Portland, Jack turned down an abandoned industrial road leading to a weathered warehouse complex. "He won't like visitors," Jack said, "but he hates Kane's kind even more." Inside the warehouse, dim lights flickered to life, revealing a man hunched over a cluttered table of computer monitors and open circuits. Eli Park, late 40s, was Korean-American, lean and sharp-eyed, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a short knot and wire-frame glasses that reflected endless lines of code. His face bore the calm precision of someone used to controlling chaos, until chaos found him. He had once been a military intelligence officer, fluent in lies and digital warfare, until an op gone wrong had killed his younger brother. The guilt had driven him underground, both figuratively and literally. Eli looked up as they entered, squinting against the light. "Jack Thorne. Hell, I thought you were done saving the world." Jack smirked faintly. "I'm not saving the world. Just someone who might be worth it." Eli's eyes shifted to Clara, recognition flickering. "Clara Weston? Weston Dynamics. You've made headlines, or maybe enemies." "Both," she admitted, her tone brittle. "I need help. There's a hard drive hidden in my car, encrypted files. They could prove everything." Eli motioned her closer. "Then let's see what ghosts are hiding in your machine." While Jack fetched the damaged drive from the SUV, Clara watched Eli work. His fingers danced over the keyboard, coaxing power from broken circuits. The monitors glowed with fragments of data, numbers, transaction logs, coded names. Lines of corruption unveiled themselves in sterile clarity. After an hour, Eli leaned back, exhaling softly. "Jack, you're not going to like this." "What is it?" Eli pointed at the screen. Funds siphoned through offshore accounts, government contracts redirected through shell corporations, all tied back to Kane. But that's not the worst part. He enlarged a folder labeled Vanguard Project. Inside were classified memos bearing federal seals. This isn't just corporate fraud. Kane's been laundering money for defense officials and paying for silence. Clara's face went white. I was going to expose it. That's why they came after me. Jack clenched his fists, the old soldier's fury simmering just beneath his calm. We send it to the FBI. Now. Eli hesitated. That's risky. Kane's got people everywhere, even in law enforcement. We need to verify before... His words cut off as the lights flickered. Echo's ears pricked up, a growl rumbling low. Jack turned sharply. Eli, do you have security cams? 4, but... The monitors suddenly went dark. Then one blinked back on, showing a convoy of black SUVs rolling through the gate. Kane's men, Jack hissed. They traced us. Eli moved fast, locking down the doors. There's a back exit through the old furnace line. It leads to the docks. Clara clutched the hard drive. What about the data? I've already sent a fragment to an encrypted FBI relay, Eli said. If we don't make it, the file still does. The first explosion hit before he finished. The warehouse trembled as a flash of orange lit the far wall. Jack pulled Clara behind a steel beam, shouting, Get down! Echo barked furiously, bounding toward the noise. The air filled with dust and the crack of suppressed gunfire. 3 armed men entered through the breach. They moved with precision, mercenaries under Kane's direct payroll. Jack recognized their coordination. Ex-military, paid killers. He fired first, dropping one. The others fanned out, taking cover behind workbenches. Eli grabbed a shotgun from beneath the table. You always bring trouble, Thorne. Jack ducked behind a pillar, reloading. Guess I missed you too. The firefight ripped through the warehouse. Sparks rained from shattered lights. Echo lunged at one of the attackers, teeth sinking into flesh, before a shot rang out. The dog yelped, collapsing near the furnace pipes. Clara screamed, rushing toward him. Stay down, Jack shouted. But she didn't listen. He covered her with suppressive fire, his movements automatic, calm amid chaos. Eli, bleeding from a graze along his arm, slammed his hand onto the control panel beside him. If they want fire, let's give it to them. He twisted a valve open, releasing a roar of gas into the air. Jack's eyes widened. Eli, don't... Get her out, Jack. Flames erupted along the floor, climbing the pipes. The attackers shouted, retreating too late. The inferno swallowed them in seconds. Jack grabbed Clara's arm, dragging her toward the back door as the warehouse became an inferno of steel and light. Outside, rain met flame in violent bursts of steam. Jack turned just in time to see Eli silhouetted against the fire, calm, unafraid. He gave a final salute before the roof collapsed. By the time they reached the docks, Jack's shoulder was bleeding again. He sank to one knee, clutching his wound. Clara knelt beside him, tears cutting through the soot on her face. Eli, he didn't have to. Jack shook his head. He made his choice, bought us time. He held out his hand, palm open. The drive? She nodded, pressing it into his grip. It's all that's left. In the distance, sirens wailed, the FBI or what was left of them that could still be trusted. Jack staggered to his feet, Echo limping beside him, head low but alive. The dog's muzzle was blackened with ash, eyes still burning with defiance. Clara looked up at the sky, the smoke mixing with dawn's first light. He saved me twice, she whispered again, this time not about Echo, but about Jack. Jack gave a weary smile. Let's make sure it means something. And as the first responders swarmed the burning warehouse, A transmission pinged quietly from Eli's hidden relay, the final piece of evidence making its way to the one person Kane couldn't silence anymore. The city woke beneath a pale gold sky. Morning sunlight slid across the glass towers, catching on the rain-washed streets of Portland and scattering into soft reflections. Jack Thorne stood on the rooftop terrace of Weston Dynamics, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him awkwardly, a soldier's frame confined by civilization. The hum of the city below felt foreign after months of silence in the woods. Echo lay at his feet, now fully healed, his fur gleaming bronze in the rising light. The dog's eyes followed pigeons drifting between the skyscrapers, his tail thumping lazily against the concrete. It had been 3 months since the fire, since Eli Park's sacrifice, and the night they sent Kane's empire crashing down. The FBI had taken weeks to sort through the encrypted evidence. Kane was in federal custody now, awaiting trial for corruption and conspiracy. His empire had collapsed like a rotten building in the wind. For Jack and Clara, the storm had finally passed. Or so it seemed. The terrace door opened with a soft click. Clara Weston stepped out, the wind tugging gently at her dark chestnut hair. She looked different from the woman Jack had pulled from the wreck that night. Softer, yet stronger in a quieter way. The sharp-edged ambition that once defined her had been tempered by gratitude and grief. She wore a navy dress, understated but elegant, and the faint lines under her eyes told stories of sleepless nights rebuilding her company from the ashes. "You're early," she said with a faint smile. "Old habits," Jack replied. "Soldiers and sunrises. We don't like surprises." Clara stepped closer, resting her hands on the terrace railing beside him. "Today's important. I couldn't have done it without you." Jack looked out at the horizon where the city met the mountains. "You would have found a way." She turned to him, her gaze steady. "No, Jack, not without you." Her voice carried both strength and vulnerability, the tone of someone who had learned what it meant to be saved and to save in return. Below them, the courtyard filled slowly with guests. The memorial ceremony was set beside the new glass atrium Weston Dynamics had built in Eli Park's honor, the Phoenix Wing, engraved with the words, "Truth is the only fire worth burning for." There were journalists, executives, former employees, and even federal agents. Yet among them, Jack stood out, not because of his presence, but because he carried no need to belong. When the ceremony began, Clara took the stage. Her voice echoed through the courtyard speakers, calm, deliberate. "We lost more than colleagues that night," she said. "We lost friends, mentors, and brave souls who believed in something greater than profit. One of them was Eli Park, a man who died protecting the truth. Another was a man who taught me that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and sometimes redemption walks beside a loyal dog." She turned slightly, her eyes finding Jack in the crowd. "Please join me in thanking the man who saved not just my life, but the soul of this company, Mr. Jack Thorne." The crowd turned. Applause rippled through the courtyard, cameras flashing like bursts of light. Jack shifted uncomfortably, giving a small nod before lowering his gaze. He'd never been one for stages or speeches. Echo barked once, almost as if embarrassed for him, earning a wave of laughter. Later, after the ceremony, journalists swarmed him. Questions about heroism, about his military past, about what came next. He answered as few as possible. They called him the forgotten hero, the man who vanished into obscurity only to resurface in fire. The title meant little to him. What mattered was quieter, the warmth of sunlight on his face, the steady rhythm of Echo's breathing beside him, the rare feeling of peace that no medal had ever brought. As the crowd thinned, Clara approached again, a folder tucked under her arm. "I wanted to show you something." She handed it to him. Inside were documents, a proposal stamped Confidential Internal Security Division. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" "Not a job," Clara said. "A partnership. We're rebuilding Weston Dynamics from the ground up. This time without secrets. I want someone I can trust to make sure it stays that way. Be our head of security. You'd have full autonomy. Your rules, your people." Jack hesitated, the weight of the offer settling in. He'd spent years running from the world, and now the world was inviting him back. "I'm not exactly built for boardrooms." Clara smiled gently. "Neither am I anymore." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to decide now. Just stop running long enough to consider it." Echo nudged his leg, as if seconding the idea. Jack chuckled under his breath. "Traitor," he murmured to the dog, then looked back at Clara. "You think a man like me fits into this world?" "I think a man like you changes it," she said simply. They stood there in silence for a while, the hum of the city below like distant waves. The sun climbed higher, glinting off the mirrored windows, painting the world in amber and silver. Jack felt something stir in his chest, not the old ache of memory, but something gentler, warmer. A beginning, not a wound. "Maybe it's time," he said finally. "Time I stop hiding behind ghosts." Clara's smile widened, but she didn't speak. Words would have broken the moment. Echo stretched beside them, yawning, then lay down with his head on his paws. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and fresh coffee from the plaza below. Jack leaned against the railing, looking down at the bustling courtyard, at people moving with purpose, laughter, and life. He realized, perhaps for the first time in years, that he didn't feel out of place anymore. The city wasn't a battlefield. It was a chance, one that life rarely gave twice. As the day broke fully, sunlight poured through the glass facade, setting the rooftop aglow. Jack turned to Clara, his voice low but certain. "Let's build something worth protecting." She nodded. "Together." Echo lifted his head, ears perked as if approving the pact. Then, with a soft sigh, the old dog rested again. The scene froze in its quiet simplicity. A soldier who had stopped running, a woman who had learned to feel again, and a loyal shepherd basking in the warmth of a new dawn. And beyond the city skyline, the first true morning of their second lives began. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles don't always arrive in blinding light or heavenly voices. Sometimes they come quietly, through a stranger's hands, a loyal dog's courage, or the simple will to keep believing when all hope seems gone. Jack and Clara's journey isn't just about survival. It's about redemption, about how God works through ordinary people to heal what war, fear, and loss have broken. In our own lives, we may not face the same fire, but each day we are given a chance to forgive, to start over, to be someone's miracle. If this story touched your heart, share it with others, leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, love, and second chances. May God bless and protect you and your loved ones, today and always.